Where's?
Canary Islands.
Oh, you are from the Canary?
Yeah.
Which one?
Lanzarote. Lanzarote. Yeah. So it was partially filmed there, as you will see. Yeah. And Senegal as well. I'm half Senegalese also. Half Senegalese, I am.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time in Senegal.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Well,
I think that we can get started. Thank you very much to everyone that joined today, especially at this point of the year. We know that it's very, very silent moment of the year. So thank you to all of you that came, the familiar faces and also the new faces. You're very welcome. My name is Carlos Shanka. For those that don't know me here, I'm a MA student at IDS. I'm in development. And I'm also one of the members or the founder of this association, Global Shapers Las Palmas, who produced this documentary, this short film that you will see in a second. So this documentary came out of desperation, you could say, because we witnessed with our own eyes how the most dangerous route in the world when it comes to deaths, 9,757 people died trying to cross to the Canary Islands just last year from Western Africa, from Northern Africa, and many others managed to get there. But it's a very precarious migratory route in which many people die and many people risk their lives, and it shouldn't be the case. So that's why our youth-led association decided to not be silent and try to portray this to the local community to try to tackle racist and xenophobic narratives, which is a very big case in Spain, especially in the Canary Islands, I would say. And yeah, tell the stories and testimonies of the people that have crossed themselves. The interesting bit, I will try not to explain too much, but the interesting bit of this short documentary is that we not only talk or portray testimonies of the contemporary route to the Canary Islands, but we also built a parallel with all the generations that had to travel to the Caribbean, in this case, Margarita Island in Venezuela, that went in very similar conditions. So it was very interesting to hear the interviews from them and see how similar, the feelings, the testimonies, the experiences were. So the main message of this is that we are all migrants, right? Migration is innate to human, it's a human condition. We'll begin with this documentary. It's called I Also Crossed, or Yo También Crucé, in Spanish. From testimonies from the Canary Islands, then we'll be joined by Dom Nifton, sorry.
It's okay.
Also Naira Bajo de Vera, she's a journalist joining with us online, and Elhadji, who is one of the three men that appeared in the documentary and went from Senegal to the Canary Islands. So, and for those online, o para aquellos en español, hay una opción para de interpretación. Así que si van al mundito abajo en Zoom, pueden verlo en inglés. Okay, I will send that. There's also interpretation available in Spanish for those on Zoom. And having said this, I think that we can just get started because we don't have too much time anyways for this. I'm sorry for the quality on Zoom. It's not the best, unfortunately. Okay, so we can go.
Margarita, Margarita, perla del mar Caribe, que un hijo tuyo te escribe rogándote gran favor que le conceda el perdón por haberte abandonado. Yo viajé en el malandro Rubén en 1950 con 15 años de edad. Partí de la playa La Garita en el Rubén con 56 personas. En el camino tuvimos muchos inconvenientes, pues nos agarró un temporal que lo rompió el palo mayor, la vela, y teníamos que andar a palo seco varios días. Encontramos un vapor, un barco francés, que lo socorrió y nos dijo que nosotros lo hubiéramos dejado atrás 250 millas de acá. Y nos dio un poco de comida y agua y el rumbo. Yo hice el viaje con muchos problemas, porque el velero no tenía lugar, no tenía comida, dormía en la intemperie. En Venezuela, bueno, llegamos a la isla Margarita por Juan Griego, Macanao. De Venezuela pasamos por Ecuador, Perú, Chile, Bolivia, Quiaca, Argentina ya. En el viaje uno siente la emoción y la tristeza de dejar a la familia atrás y llegar a un país donde no conoce a nadie y no tener donde comer ni dormir.
Llegué en 2001 y llegué con 16 años. El viaje en sí mismo pues duró creo que 16 horas, porque salimos en esa época, en 2001, pues salimos de Tarfaya, que es el punto más cercano a Fuerteventura, a las Islas Canarias, y salimos de noche, de madrugada, y llegamos aquí por el día, o sea, sobre las 5 o 6 de la tarde. La embarcación era tipo patera, y durante la travesía, pues estábamos casi todos malos, más o menos, de mareados, vomitando y todo esto. Decidí venir aquí a España, pues, para poder ayudar a mi familia y sacarlos para adelante.
Yo llegué aquí, creo que tenía 19 años, en 2020. Yo decidí marcharme porque había un punto que yo ya no aguantaba y mis amigos tampoco, y hemos decidido hacer el viaje juntos. Íbamos a pescar, no podíamos conseguir lo que queremos, íbamos día y noche a ir a trabajar. Todo salía a cero y hacíamos mucho, perdíamos dinero. A lo mejor tu madre te presta dinero, te va a pescar y lo pierdes. Y así vamos hundiendo y llega un punto tú dirás, no, eso no puede seguir.
Cuando me lo comentó mi hermano, que se quería venir y todo esto, pues salté de alegría, la verdad. Sinceramente salté de alegría porque en ese momento pues yo no veía futuro ahí, no veía nada. Veía a mis amigos o mis conocidos que venían y todo esto, y yo no, ¿por qué? No sé qué, pero sí, estuve muy feliz, por lo menos, de saberlo.
Yo decidí marcharme porque en ese tiempo yo trabajaba y estudiaba y se me hacía imposible porque no ganaba lo suficiente. En Canarias trabajaba en una farmacia con 7 años para llevar los medicamentos a domicilio. Y y estudiaba la misma ley.
La gente pues piensa cuando uno emigra, pues emigra por placer o algo así, pero no saben que emigra pues para ayudar a su familia o por necesidad o porque huye de algo, ya sea guerra o mafias o lo que sea. Pero sin embargo, cuando llegas aquí, pues lo que quieres es algo mejor, buscar trabajo y todo esto. Pues entonces la gente quizá pues siente rechazo a eso porque piensan que les vienen a quitar ayudas o les vienen a quitar trabajo o a invadir sus tierras.
Yo en el momento que decidí emigrar, o sea, yo pensaba muchas cosas en realidad, porque ese momento yo sabía que voy a dejar una familia atrás y no sabía si yo voy a llegar o no. Entonces tú allí solo intentas tirar para adelante y después de llegar, tú lo que vas a intentar hacer es ayudarlos. Que ellos todos los días que yo pasaba el mar, yo lo pasaba mal, pero ellos no comían, no dormían, porque no sabían cómo yo estaba. Y creo que ustedes han visto cómo llegan las pateras, a veces llegan destrozados. Y no es algo que es lógico para usar para viajar, nosotros lo sabemos. Pero si no te queda nada, tienes que aguantar. Entonces, si uno decide hacerles el viaje, tiene que pensar como nosotros lo hemos pensado, psicológicamente, físicamente, lo que va a hacer.
Lo que sentía era tristeza por la vida que llevaba, que no tenía para comer ni para mandar a la familia. Yo a la familia la quería mucho.
Cuando llegamos allí, en realidad lo que no esperaba era sentir que nosotros no somos igual. Eso fue una de las cosas que me tiró para arriba, para abajo, y no me cuadraba en la cabeza. Porque como una persona normal sale en la calle, porque estábamos recién llegados, ni siquiera hemos hablado con la familia, y te empiezan a sacar fotos, te graban. Allí a lo mejor si no sabes, tú sientes que has logrado algo grande, eres un rey, pero no es el caso. Después de enterarse, es todas las noticias, a lo mejor con una foto de tu patera o tu cara, hablando que están viniendo gente. O sea, lo hablan de una manera que tú sientes como si es una enfermedad que está entrando en un país y tú dirás, ¿qué está pasando? No sé si es por ser negro, no sé si es por venir en patera y no sé si es por ser africano. En realidad no me cuadra porque una persona puede pensar así. Porque yo creo que para entender una persona, tiene que intentar tener contacto con ellos, saber. Después de saber, entonces allí tú decides juzgar si te parece bien, si te parece mal. Porque no puedes decir sin saber nada. No puedes juzgar una persona de un continente y decir que todos son igual, así.
Mi viaje me hizo sentir responsabilidad por dejar la familia atrás, del cual yo trabajaba y reunía 50 bolívares y le mandaba a mi familia aquí. Yo mandaba 100 y recibía 1.500 pesetas.
Y a lo largo del trayecto y todo esto, pues aprendí algo que es saber escuchar y saber pues, ayudar.
Siempre digo que es una vida nueva, porque al llegar aquí aprende todo desde cero. Aprende a estudiar, a leer, cómo hablar con la gente, lo que le gusta a la gente, lo que no. Yo ahora mismo estoy trabajando donde me gusta estar porque trabajo con inmigrantes, la gente que pasaron lo mismo que he pasado yo. Me gusta estar con ellos, apoyarlos.
Para migrar hacia el extranjero es necesario tener un poco de coraje para poder llevar adelante los problemas que encuentre en el camino. Yo le diría a los inmigrantes que se fijen bien dónde van y de qué forma van a salir, porque eso de arriesgar la vida en un velero o una lancha es muy grave.
Para mí, inmigrar es coger una mochila o de problemas o ya sea de preocupaciones o todo esto, pues la coges y la pones a tu espalda y te buscas la vida. En un país u otro siempre va a haber alguien que te acoja.
Llego a un punto que siempre digo que tarde o temprano yo sé que voy a volver a mi país. Siempre la gente que piensa que nosotros venimos aquí a vivir, a quitarle todo, y al final tenemos unas promesas con nuestra familia. Hemos decidido viajar para ayudarlo, no para estar fuera hasta nunca.
Okay, well, can you hear me? So that was a short. As you can see, it was filmed in the Canary Islands. We literally shot it 1 or 2 months ago. It was all produced within the last 10 months. I'm from Lanzarote Island. You saw some shots from Lanzarote. Naira is in Tenerife right now. And we have people from every island present in the team. As you saw, again, it's a very deadly route. Many people die. And Elhadji will be joining us today. You already saw him. He's here with us. I don't know if we can see him. He went from Senegal, and right now he's a worker at the Center for Migrant Minors in Tenerife Island. He will talk about his crossing into the Canary Islands in 2020. Then we have Dom Knifeton on my left. He's a professor of climate change and society at the University of Sussex. His research is mainly focused on development, climate change, disaster risk, migration and health, if I'm not wrong. So we have quite an interdisciplinary and intersectional perspective, especially when it comes to climate change, which is actually a topic that I'm personally very worried when it comes to this route. And then Naira, she's a journalist. She's based in Tenerife. I think she's in Gran Canaria. I think she's from Tenerife. She was helping in the documentary. She was scoring in the team, especially when it comes to the scripting. And award-winning social justice journalist who helped us doing the documentary. So I would like to start with asking Naira, because I remember, like, when we were kids, this route has been more and more dangerous. More and more people have been crossing. It's been an exponential growth in terms of numbers. And when we were kids, we were simply asking, why can't people just take a plane? Like, if I go to Senegal, it's simply less than 100 euros for me to go to Senegal, right? And it would take like 2 hours for me. But why do people risk their life for 7 days, 8 days, 10 days? Sometimes they don't even make it, through the ocean. So obviously this is a very political or geopolitical, complex issue. So Naira, I would like, you are an expert in this. From your experience, what have you observed in terms of the most visible consequences of the EU border externalization policies on migrants arriving to the Canary Islands?
Well, thank you so much. I'm very happy to be joining this conversation. And well, to begin answering your question, one thing that we have to keep in mind in this topic is that a lot of these people who are taking these small boats, which are very dangerous, so many people die. We have seen that in the documentary. One big thing that a lot of people do is they try to apply for visas, and they are most of the times denied. We saw that in the documentary as well. Countries like Senegal or Guinea, for example, like more than the half of the visas are denied, which is one of the main reasons why people have to risk their lives in order to get to a different place. So why do they want to leave their country? There are so many reasons. I think it would be wrong to say just that there's an economic issue. It's just because they want to live better lives, which most of the times is true, obviously, but there's a bigger background, and there's a colonial relation in there that is very important. And talking to many Senegalese people, for example, which is one of the nationalities that is more seen in this route, in the one that goes from Africa to the Canary Islands, is that many of them, not most of them, are fishers or used to be fishers, and they use like these traditional ways of fishing, which are being menaced by bigger boats that come from Europe, Asia, and different, especially Europe and Asia, I would say. And that makes them have less fish, it's also influenced by climate change, because there is less fish in the places they used to work because of climate change, and because of these bigger boats that are taking all that remains. So yeah, there are a lot of things we can say about that. It's also a route that is not very known outside of the Canary Islands and Spain, because we are in an international view. We are more focused maybe in the Mediterranean, which obviously we have to focus on that, but we also have to focus on this route. And I think one possible reason why people don't really know about all the dangers that are in this location is because on the one hand, because the Canary Islands are seen as this touristic paradise for people in Europe, and not as like somewhere where people live or where people have to risk their lives to get into Europe. And also because it's another step of the externalization of borders, because there are different steps, right? We have one first step that is in the African countries in this case, because we have, for example, Frontex, which is an agency that spends a lot of money to prevent migration. And that operates trying to make people to not leave their countries. And then the next step would be the dangers of crossing, because people are denied a visa, a safe way to migrate. And then the next step would be the Canary Islands, because it's a region that it's located in Africa, and it's like politically Europe, but geographically Africa. So it's kind of another step of this externalization, right? And I don't know if I answered everything you asked, but yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I would like for you perhaps to elaborate on that paradox, right? Like, especially in Lanzarote, like that's like one of the easternmost islands of the archipelago. We are just about 100 kilometers away from Western Sahara, and we are officially classified as EU outermost region, which is essentially ultra-peripheral region in Spanish. how does this periphery function within EU geopolitics?
Okay, can you please elaborate that question?
Yeah, so we are geographically African, but we are politically European, right? So we are basically the periphery of the EU. So geopolitically, yeah, what are the power dynamics, right? You mentioned colonialism as well, because obviously there's an intention behind closing borders. Many people that try to go to Europe through Italy, you know, that route has been harder and harder to go through, then through Melilla and Ceuta, which are the cities, Spanish cities in Morocco. So what's, you know, the colonial, the power behind denying the border access into Spain?
Oh, I think it's also we saw that a lot during COVID and also before and after, but there's like I mean it's way easier to get inside Europe, like the continental Europe, if you go to Andalusia, for example, right? It's a lot easier to just take a train or whatever. But if you live in the islands, if you arrived to the islands, you need permissions to fly. And we saw a lot of that during COVID. There was this blockade for people to go to another country or even to go to Spain. And it was, we experienced this huge racism in the Canarian airports, because even you could see, for example, Black people or Arab people buying their own tickets to fly, and then they went to the airport and they would be stopped just because they were Black. And obviously, if they had like an ID or something, they could fly. But I mean, they would never stop a white person just because they were white, right? So this was like a racial control that was in airports. Just the excuse was COVID, right? But there was something else. They didn't want people to go to continental Europe. Now it's it's better now because more people, like, they're going faster. They're related to Spain and to other countries, but still it's a lot more complicated to have this mobility if you are in the Canary Islands than if you arrive in another point like in Italy or in Andalusia or other points of Europe. So there's obviously a strategy here, like we never see how people die in the sea unless there's like unless we have the media to see it. And it's really easy to just ignore that if we are in apart from the fact that it's in the sea, if we are in an outermost region, because it's like the place we go for holidays, right? So everything is like a whole strategy, I would say, to make to strengthen the borders.
Yeah, because there's, as you said, there's very little sensibilization. You know, as we perceive, it's a very silent death trap. You cannot see the boats that don't arrive, and the boats that arrive. You know, there are so many stories behind these numbers. It's not just a number, right? Every single person has their own story, and when you listen to testimonies, they're incredible. You know, and devastating sometimes. And also the Canary Islands, we are obviously, as you say, a starting point in many cases to go to Europe. The vast majority of migrants, which the usual profile is young male, right? Use the Canary Islands as a transitory route. Most of the people don't want to stay in the Canary Islands or even Spain. They just go to France, Germany, and so on. What is the political and social climate in the Canary Islands or in Spain, you know, when it comes to what's perceptions on migration? how you talk about the local narratives against migration, and how do they reproduce in terms of colonial and xenophobic structures?
Just to add up a little bit, there's something that a lot of people tell me when I do interviews, and they say that the boat, this route is like the back door to reach Europe when other ways of migrating fail. And there are even some fishers that they even say that if I cannot get fish to feed my family and to get some money, as I've always done, then I'm gonna get my boat and I'm just gonna, migrate. So just to add a little bit to that. And answering your question, you were saying about what's the climate, the social climate. And I'm gonna start answering that question with just something that I remember that happened a few months ago. As I was going to a gas station with my car, and I saw there was a paper where you go to pay, and it said, sign here to stop migration. And I was like, I wasn't shocked, because these are speeches that we have been experiencing for a very long time. But I am actually worried about this, because it's a danger for the people who are living here right now. And we have seen a lot of hate speeches. That there was a time, the university in Tenerife, the public university, had like an exposition where they had this small boat as a way to remember all the people who have died in the sea, and to know about this route. And one day someone set it on fire, and I commented about that on my social media, and and it kind of went viral, my comment, and some people say that the ones who had to be set on fire was the migrants. And I immediately just stop the comments. Like, I didn't want to read all that. And it's something that, we have seen even demonstrations against migration several times. And recently, this is not directly linked to this, but there was recently a 19-year-old man who died in an airport here in the Canary Islands, because he was experiencing mental health problems, and he took a knife and he menaced someone, and then like five or six police officers shot him and they got to the neck, and he died. And there were demonstrations on both sides. Some people saying that he needed to, there are other ways to prevent someone from attacking other people, especially if it's someone with struggling with their mental health, and who never had another problem before with any authority, and he was like, everything was fine with him, but he was having these struggles with his mental health. Then there are other protocols to stop him, to prevent him from hurting someone. And obviously, you don't have to kill someone to prevent that. And on the other hand, when there was some people saying that he was dangerous, that he had to go back to his country, and all these typical narratives that we can see when we talk about migration. So I think the climate is very polarized. We have people defending human rights, and we have people who are very invested on that. But on the other hand, we also have these narratives that are very damaging. I like to think that it's bigger, the number of people who are supporting human rights. But still, this is we have to find ways to stop this kind of narratives. And I will have to say that some journalists are not helping on that, criminalizing determinate bodies and criminalizing migration. And also we have to the documentary shows that perfectly. We have to remember the past of the islands. We had to migrate because we needed to. It was survival. It was a necessity. And other nationalities have migrated as well. We didn't have the same problem, the same social problem when Ukrainian people came to the islands.
Yeah.
And that's basically racism. So when you say racism in the islands, sometimes some people would say, no, we are not racist. I mean, we have to admit that.
Yeah, and I bet that many people here in this room, like, you know, you can compare it to many places, including here in this country, we're in the UK now. And well, Elhadji and I, we can personally, like, by living the Canary Islands, we can tell many stories that we see and perceive constantly. So yeah, as you mentioned, this documentary is trying to tackle, you know, a bit of these narratives, because many people don't even know that about, you know, like our history, and it's not centuries ago. It was 80 years ago. Jose Don Pepe, he's still alive, and he's telling the story of how he had to go to Venezuela in similar conditions. So, yeah, I agree with you. We'll have a moment later for questions and discussion on this. But I would like to talk a bit more or explore these linkages between migration and climate change, or, you know, the global side of migration. What are the factors that, you know, make people migrate? There's a high unemployment rates in youth in Senegal, Morocco, but now with climate change, environmental degradation in Senegal, like, as we said, declining fish stocks. So when all of these problems intersect, right, they become significant. But I think that we're not paying enough attention to climate and migration. So that's why, Dom, I would like to, if you could, you know, tell us a bit about the broad picture on the linkage between climate and migration here.
Yeah, thank you, Carlos. Yeah, it's a tricky one because there's some things that you've both talked about there. The racial aspect of it, before I talk about the climate, that I think really go deeply into how migration is viewed. And there was this anthropologist in the 30s in the UK called Griffiths Taylor. And he was a racist, basically. And he penned this discourse about how climate determinism, about how culture was related to the climate. And at the top of the culture chain were the Scandinavians and the Mongolians, because the climate was favorable. But he laced it with lots of racist narratives, like Africans are lazy, the hot sun. So I think there has been that all the time. And I think the Canaries are a very interesting place because, as you talk, people migrate from Europe to the Canaries, but we never call them climate migrants. Excellent. But if we do call people climate migrants if they're going the other way. So I kind of struggle with the term climate migration, even though that's sort of what I've studied. So yes, I think also what you alluded to there, especially with the fishing, so the fishing industry in Senegal, which I've worked with quite a lot, and how so there's a climate signal to their changes in the fishing stocks. And there's also the big issue, as you mentioned, of big boats coming in from Europe and taking the fish. Which is bigger, I don't know. But that's the issue is a political one. It's not primarily a climate one. In the same way that if you want to disprove the climate link, not disprove it, but sort of like pour scorn on it a bit, you say, well, where are the biggest flows? They're to the oil producing countries that are very hot. So people aren't migrating to a supposedly more inhabitable climate. They're going for lots of different reasons, some of which are economic and some of which are politically economic. So yeah, I sit on this UN board, the International Resource Panel, and we try to look at the relationship between natural resources and migration.
Yeah.
So to change it from climate, I don't think anyone really moves because it's hot or it's cold or it's wet, apart from Brits trying to escape this damn weather. Today was supposed to be sunny, wasn't it? It's really not my idea of sunny. So we went through the natural resource lens. And what that opens up, and I think we found or showed possibly, was the group that you haven't mentioned, which are the people left behind. Now, in the climate narrative, they're called trapped populations. So what traps you in a place? You want to move, but you can't. As you said, they tend to be young males, probably with some fishing experience. So the boat isn't that bad, although someone mentioned about everyone being sick. Yeah, so I kind of was interested in those trapped populations who were stuck, and there's various ways in which you can think people are stuck. They can't afford to move. Well, you can understand that. But also, there's also something around some issues some of you might have come across called subjectivities. So Michel Foucault's idea that power exerts itself in terms of how you see yourself. You probably don't walk into a supermarket and just steal stuff, even though you might be justified in doing so, because you don't see yourself as a thief. Or if you do, well done. So how we sort of depower or power ourselves for who can go and who can't go was the thing we started to explore, and saw that in Bangladesh about people kind of wanting to return and that they couldn't return. So the climate bit, I think, is a bit of not red herring, but it sort of depoliticizes it when we talk about climate change.
Yeah.
And if we talk about natural resources, I'm not massively keen on framing natural resources, but tenure. If you haven't got the tenure, if you haven't got the access and the ability to use the resources where you are, and the colonial history has stolen them from Senegal. I mean, as we know, Senegal has that big history of slavery. The last bit, I think, really sorry, I'm not really answering your question. I think it sprung to mind. So sorry, I'm just old. It's not because I know anything. I was on this European project and we were talking to the EU members. And I play this serious game with people that is about actually disaster risk reduction. But it's framed negatively, is if you run out of money, you migrate. And it made me kind of really think, because I get them to rethink the rules. And one of the European people, and that doesn't mean all of them, of course, said, well, let's invade. That village have gone. Let's take their village. Now obviously that is just one person. It doesn't mean anything. But I thought it was interesting in that grounding of how discourse are around people and, sorry, I forgot the name of the journalist. Anaida. Saying about how, different people are viewed in it. So what the European Union were trying to do was say, what's the biggest threat at the moment? Okay, there's an existential threat from climate change, blah, blah, blah. Sorry if I sound blasé, last year, climate change. This year's existential threat, obviously, is AI. And they were saying, well, they were talking about the dumbbell of migration, like a dumbbell. And you can see I never use them, but they were saying, we got an aging population in Europe, We've got an aging population in North America. We've got an aging population in China. Where haven't we got an aging population? Sub-Saharan Africa. The jobs that AI they can't see fixing particularly quickly are the very high-end jobs. Yeah, the jobs you're all going to get or have got. And the, excuse my French, the arse wipers. Yeah, the care workers. Very highly skilled, but very lowly paid, not recognized. And that there will be a need for migration to get people in. So I see that narrative changing, but again, you're faced with changing that narrative in the same way that the UK welcomed in Caribbean workers in the 50s, the Windrush sort of generation. They was basically saying that's what they're going to do, and that's what the Germans had invited so many of the Syrian crisis migrants, stroke refugees in. So to go back to your global question, I think climate can be a sort of path to not avoid, but it's masking some very political economy questions.
Yeah, you touched many interesting points there. I think that one of the most powerful narratives is jobs and labor, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't know if that, like, if you look at the microeconomics in the EU as well, as you say, you have these diamond-shaped aging populations that have to be covered by young populations, right? And when it comes to AI as well, they will be the hardest to replace. So we actually need people working.
Yeah.
And that I can chip in, obviously, as you've written about this, I believe. And also, the multicausal effects of migration, as I mentioned earlier, like, people migrate for all a myriad reasons. And I was just thinking about, you mentioned natural resources, right, before climate change, which can also be problematic. But I remember the testimony also of someone that I know in Tenerife. I think he's in Tenerife now. He went from Mali. Also conflict, for example, right? In the previous years, we've had a lot of people living because of conflict in Mali. But this man specifically, he was telling that when he's now in his late 40s, 50s. When he was very young, he lived in a village, and wood would just be a few meters away for cooking. And now when he comes back to the village, people have to travel for kilometers to get the same quantity for the same goods and activities. So that's also a very strong indicator of that people have been experiencing the effects for a while, right? And that's why, because also when you go to other countries and other regions, in Italy especially, I've seen a lot of international agencies and the global governance on this topic, and you've been involved a lot with the UN, World Bank, IOM, obviously the EU, the UK, among others. I'm curious about how open these institutions are in recognizing and acting on the intersecting drivers of migration. Because specifically in the Canary Islands, personally, correct me if I'm wrong, Naira, I don't believe that we have a lot of intervention from the international community either. It's more of a local, issue or national, thing to talk about. But what are these big organizations doing about this?
Yeah, I mean, I struggle a bit with the big organizations. So you had a line in the documentary about irregular and insecure routes, and that sort of parallels the UN line around that. I can't remember. It's something like regular and safe passage.
Okay.
And I suppose I slightly read that as in control, as they're trying to control who they let in and who they let out,
Exactly.
rather than a genuine concern. I mean, there are obviously individuals, but whether there's an institutional concern for migration, because there's a question of whether people are really attached to place attachment. You know, who wants to move and who doesn't want to move. And I suppose the very simple logic of, with open borders, what might happen.
Yeah.
And so just going to the extreme of, right, well, if the whole of Senegal or West Sahara, I mean, West Sahara, you can understand why people would leave it. Senegal, I really like Senegal, but I suppose, and I'm thinking of Saint Louis and places like that are lovely. The expectation that if those populations just do en masse leave, and there's very little evidence of climate, for instance, moving people across borders. It tends to move people internally. And I think that is welcomed by the UN type of boards, because then it doesn't become a political question for them to solve. It's a political question within country. So the IOM, which is the UN sort of like sibling, it's supposed to take care of migrants. And the tricky question, I suppose, is its classification of people, of whether they're refugees. So there was a big push in the early 2000s for climate to be included in the Refugee Act. So the Refugee Act, as you probably know, says in my words, if you're forced across a border for fear of persecution on return. And the UN was very much against climate being included in that. And part of that is because that opens the door for everybody. So everyone will talk about SIDS, the small island developing states, and the Kiribati moving, and the Fridtjof Nanson's passports could be used. But I think there is this is going to sound really boring. There's a problem in trying to show that someone moves because of climate. And that is used by a lot of the institutions to say, well, how can we show that someone is moving because of climate? In the same way, if you think about yourselves, why do you do anything? Why did you choose to come to Sussex and so on? Your decisions are multiple. So there was a famous study by Sabine Henry in 2003, I think it was, sounding like Rain Man, aren't I? Who interviewed 8,800, this is definitely Rain Man territory, and 43 life histories of people in Burkina Faso. So just on from Mali, for those of you whose geography is as bad as mine. And of those 8,843, only 29 said they moved because of the drought in that case. Statistically, it showed a drought signal. But even if you ask people why they've moved, there's multiple reasons. And I think possibly that's used as well by it is pretty true, or it seems valid, but it's used to sort of push back against, right, well, we can't include climate in there. And I think you keep coming back to racial narratives. And I don't think there's much escaping that. And that's mentioned, but it's mentioned as a sideshow.
And it's very important to ask them, to people directly, to see what the experiences are, because as you mentioned, there are many intersecting consequences and casualties that prompt people to leave. Why do you go to another country? Why do you come to Sussex, right? It's it really depends a lot. So that's why today, Elhadji, we have the privilege to have him today, joining from Canary Islands. I know you can hear me, Elhadji. There you go. Well, thank you for sharing your story with us on the documentary. We'll ask you some questions in a moment, But personally, like I would like if you could tell us a bit about, you know, that moment that you decided to leave, what pushed you to make that choice, and I will translate from Spanish to English as well.
Sí, sí,
Sí, okay,
sí.
sí, dale.
La verdad que de tomar una decisión siempre hay algunas ciertas razones, pero las decisiones en general que toman los inmigrantes son muchas decisiones. O sea, una de las cosas que nombro, como por ejemplo el profesor, porque yo trabajaba en el mar. Entonces no es fácil que tú trabajes en el mar. Es que nosotros tampoco tenemos redes para pescar todo lo que tenemos dentro del mar, pero pescamos lo
Dame
que
un
nos
momento,
sirve en su
te
momento.
traduzco, porque se me olvidó. I have a very bad memory. So he's saying that there are many different decisions, the same, for people to migrate. Elhadji was working as a fisherman in Senegal, and a common issue that they were having was with the nets, that they would get broken. Well, and I might add this as well. In the documentary, he mentioned that, you know, the gas was being too expensive, and also the prices for fishing. Yeah, didn't make a living, but I'm sure I shouldn't be adding too much. Vale, perdona, sí.
Y eso, que no es fácil que tu trabajo, lo que es tuyo, o sea, no es que te lo quitan, pero tú estás yendo a pescar a tu manera porque es los muelles que tenemos para pescar. Y como dijo él, que viene de barco, que tienen más derecho a pescar que a ti mismo que estás pescando en tu país, porque detrás de eso lo que tienen ponen como, por ejemplo, yo trajo mi barco, vengo de Alemania, de Inglaterra, o vengo de España o Francia, contrato muy poca gente de Senegal y los restos de mi país pesco y me vuelvo. Entonces, al contratar gente de Senegal va a parecer que está trabajando para este país y entonces no. Entonces, para hacer eso, tener dos personas contratadas parece que tú tienes todo el derecho para pescar y está perjudicando a la gente que son de ese país y no te das cuenta o se da cuenta y le da igual, por ejemplo.
Vale. It's not an easy condition. There are many people from Europe that go by boat, vessels, to fish, to take the fishing stocks of the coast, and they come to your own country. In mind that you come from Germany, from France, Europe, etc., with European workers, and they will hire, say, 2 local people in Senegal to pretend or to showcase that they are hiring local people, but in practice, it's not the case.
Y ellos no se dan cuenta que van pescando con barco. Nosotros lo que tenemos es patera. ¿Sabes? Patera es eso. O sea, no tiene nada grande, nada especial, ni ninguna máquina adentro. Entonces, tú te vas a pescar con eso. Si es nosotros mismos a pescar de noche, es peligrosísimo. A veces nos pasa de accidente que unos barcos de angle, de españoles que te suben encima, te muere un amigo, te pasa cualquier cosa, ¿sabe? Entonces esa zona lo va a poner como un medio cruce que va a parecer una ruta de los barcos, porque en realidad no lo es, pero siempre va, cada día tiene más miedo para ir a trabajar. Encima, con miedo y no ganar nada, son dos cosas diferentes. Entonces, todo eso lo junta, siempre te hace tomar unas ciertas decisiones. Porque nosotros, en realidad, quien conoce Senegal sabe que vivimos en dos cosas, en agricultura y en pesca. Y lo que más va arriba es el pesca. Entonces, si tenemos cosas que nos fastidian en esa parte, es muy complicado.
Sí. So, when usually European vessels go and fish, they don't realize that they're using big machinery. As opposite to us, we use pateras, which are the traditional small wooden boats, and they don't have this strong machinery. So if you fish with a patera, it's much harder, especially in the night. It becomes actually very dangerous. There've been cases of Spanish boats, taking over or collapsing, I believe, with these local boats. So every day you are more and more scared. Everything starts to add on, and eventually it's worth it to leave your country, especially in the case of Senegal, which is based on agriculture and fishing. So fishing is right now more powerful for the economy. So, yeah.
Entonces, o sea, de vivir eso y sabes que toda tu familia depende de pesca y está yendo a pescar, al final tiene el mismo miedo de ir a pescar y de venir en España y no tienes nada, te vas día y noche, pierdes. A veces, por ejemplo, tu madre que trabaja como en la agricultura o tu padre o tu madre que trabaja en la cuesta, genera dinero para dártelo para que vuelva a comprar gasolina, para ir a pescar, para no conseguir nada, o deja tu red en el mar y los barcos lo cortan y lo llevan porque tiene más potencia y ellos ni siquiera se dan cuenta. O después si levantan la red, se da cuenta que han destrozado unos par de redes de alguien, le da agua, lo cortan y lo tiran, ¿sabes?
So from this, knowing that your whole family relies on you, on the income you bring to the household, you have the same concerns to go to Spain. If your parents are working in fishing or agriculture and they lend you money for gas, sometimes it's not enough. So it's a cycle. And then many boats also, by mistake or incidentally, break the fishing nets that they need to use.
Y eso son cosas que pasan y nadie se da cuenta en ningún lado porque si no tienes para comer, creo que no va a tener para comprar internet, para estar difundiendo unos videos para que la gente se da cuenta que está pasando. Porque yo creo que primero lo que tienes que luchar con el hambre y con el bien de tu familia antes de estar luchando algo políticamente que tiene más potencial que tú, que está arrastrando un poquito y después quieres luchar contra eso cuando tú tienes más problemas con tu familia, lo que tienes que hacer para que comen día a día, porque quien conoce Senegal es que en realidad muy poca gente tiene para comprar para mañana, siempre compramos día a día y funciona así.
Sí. So these things happen all the time. People don't realize if you don't have internet, you won't be sharing videos of what's happening. First, you care about bringing money and food to the table, and then you will start to worry about fighting this issue. And in Senegal, very few people can save up. So people usually buy on a daily basis their goods. They rely on daily income.
Y un día que te va, como lo que digo antes, te pasa lo mismo y vuelve y tu familia te daba hasta un punto que tú mismo con tu orgullo vas a decir, no lo voy a pedir más y porque tú sabes que no tienen, porque lo que te daban es lo que le juntaban para después depender de ti. Entonces, si todo eso se generaliza, más se va hundiendo toda la familia porque en realidad no te hundas tú solo porque te daban toda la familia y no consigue nada, está hundiendo la familia. Entonces, después, y porque han pasado años que todos los recursos que teníamos lo sacaron de fuera de África, entonces, ¿dónde lo vemos? En Europa, entonces te cuadra rápidamente para que puedas tomar unas decisiones para pirarse de ahí.
So eventually you decide to not ask for more lend money for gas because they depend on you. It's your own decision, it's responsibility that you have for your family. And over time, the resources that we had here in Senegal were taken to Europe. So again, eventually, you also have to. Ok, Elhadji, te voy a hacer otra pregunta.
Vale.
¿Tú trabajas en un centro de menores migrantes? ¿Qué
Sí,
puedes contar sobre la necesidad de la experiencia, cómo se sienten ahí? So the question is, he's working in a migrant minors center in Tenerife, as a social worker, if I'm not wrong, como un trabajador social, ¿no?
no como intérprete y
Also,
educador.
interpretation, sorry. So yeah, I'm asking about the experiences that he perceives and the feelings of young underage migrants.
Allí el trabajo se trata de llevarse un mundo, un vida, porque en realidad tú tienes que tratarse, llevarse bien con más de 200 pibes, entonces allí es un mundo.
So you have to get along, and it's a whole world to deal with 200 young people.
Porque todo el mundo sabemos que todos los centros inmigrantes menores son inmigrantes, vienen de fuera. Entonces, si uno viene de fuera, tiene porque algo tiene en su corazón.
Because we all know that all minor centers are centers where most of them or all of them are foreigners. So we have to treat them equally.
Entonces, si uno viene de fuera, es lo mismo que pasa de ellos, es lo que pasan. Y nosotros, a lo mejor, al pasarlo primero, se nos va un poco el dolor repasarlo. Y como ellos son recién llegados, les duele más, le pasa más cosas con su familia. Justo ayer veo un niño que todavía no sabe mucho de su padre, porque es una patera que salió en este mes, no, el mes pasado, el 5, y todavía no saben mucho, entonces siempre habrá uno triste, otro feliz, y tienen que tratar de estar con ellos siempre en los mejores y las malas.
So it's easier for us because we took on the journey and the trip before them. For them, it's much harder, it's much more recent. So we support them. There's this case of this kid whose father left a month ago or so, and they're still uncertain on where he is. So they're like supporting the father, supporting the son. Yeah.
Eso, entonces siempre tiene que saber cómo comportarse con ellos, tiene que darte cuenta tú como educador lo más rápido posible si uno está feliz, si uno está triste. Entonces, o sea, tiene que estar muy centrado en el trabajo para que puedas darse cuenta de esas cosas muy rápido. Porque a lo mejor yo puedo estar triste, salgo de mi casa, estoy triste, y a lo mejor allí un niño me hace ser feliz, como un niño puede estar triste y tú lo puedes hacer feliz o lo cambia el día. Porque en realidad son niños.
So you also have to know how to deal with them, to not be sad and to be happy in the work. Sometimes I can be sad when going out of my house, and then I meet them and I go happy, or vice versa. Sometimes I can be happy and they can be sad. So, you know, they support each other. So yeah, it's a very good job that he's doing. Lo damos por aquí. Voy a preguntar a la gente que haga preguntas, que nos quedamos sin tiempo. Y ahora te dice Lara. Okay, so we're running out of time. We really want to have some discussions based on, you know, of this whole event or questions that you might have to for any of the speakers today. We have them right here. Yeah, what do you think? How do you feel about this? Whose voices are missing? How do we act? I know that we have people that specialize in migration, I think, here. I see new faces. So it'd be great to, you know, hear from you when it comes to South-South, you know, migration, intra-national, international, or in this case, which is South-North dynamics. So the floor is open to you. Feel free to ask any question.
I have a question. Thank you very much for the great documentary and discussion, first of all. And coming back to the documentary, I saw all of the interviewee male. So my question is, as the boat migration is really dangerous, how is the ratio of like male and female out of the migrating people, and if there is a like unbalance, what is the reason behind of it? That is my question.
There's definitely an imbalance. It's good that you asked this question. We can touch a bit on the gender dynamics here. Naira I think that Naira will be the one that can tell us. If I'm not wrong, it was 4% woman, female, according to the same report, but Naira knows better than me.
Well, I couldn't say a percentage because I really don't remember, to be honest, but it is true that most people migrating in this route are young male. And but obviously there are women migrating in this route. The thing is, for women in this route, I mean, it's extremely dangerous, and we can see a lot of a big part of the women who are migrating in this route are trying to escape from things like genital mutilation or marriage, or sometimes some of these women get raped in the transit, right, when they go from one country to another to get to the boat, and they come pregnant. Obviously, this is not the case for all of them, but it is a big issue that has to be addressed. And so this route is extremely dangerous for women. We can also sometimes we can see families, but it's not there's not like obviously the big thing is with a young male. You mentioned that in the documentary we can only see 3 male, and I would have loved to get a woman, but we couldn't reach someone who wanted to speak. But however, the situation for women in this route, as I said, is extremely dangerous, and sometimes some women are even like have the double vulnerability, because when they travel, because when there's a family, they have more protection, and when there's a woman, they have more protection. So some men take one woman and they menace her by saying that you have to say I am your brother or your husband or whatever, because when we arrive, we're going to have more protection if we are together. So there's this double vulnerability, and it has to be addressed. However, when people arrive, there are some specific protocols for women, and they are way more protected once they come to the islands. However, the transit is extremely dangerous for women. I don't know if I answer your question with this.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I just have a follow-on question to the gender dynamics, because I think from my experience in the UK, working with migrants coming to the UK as well, as there's a lot more of a positive connotation towards female migrants, and it's a little bit problematic as well, because this idea that women are much more vulnerable, whereas the men are coming as economic migrants, and there's also this fear just in general about racialized men. So I wondered how much of that is also true in this context. Is there kind of, because there is far fewer women migrating to the Canary Islands because it is so dangerous, is this idea that all the migrants are coming are these dangerous men, and that kind of plays into the sort of racial narrative of it all? It's the same in the Canary Islands, basically.
Yeah, thanks for
I think it's important that you ask this question and you put that on the table, because there is also a very problematic way that the media and society address Black men in at least in this context. And I highlighted these dynamics because it happens, but obviously it's not the majority. It's not like something that happens in every single case of women who migrate. But I think it's important to expose this kind of specific dangers that women are put into. However, I really appreciate that you mentioned this, because as I said before, there's when I spoke previously, there's a narrative in the Canary Islands that are criminalizing a lot. Oh, sorry, I don't have battery. Oh, okay, so that people are being, like, Black men are being very criminalized, and associated with narratives of criminality, rape, and women specifically are.
Oh, I think that maybe we lost the battery. What a shame. Yeah, yeah. Sorry about that. I guess I should join very shortly, but I hope that was pretty much well answered. On top of my head, I think I can recall that was like 4% female. It's a very low ratio with female. Yeah.
It's a really good question. So there's various theories around migration, as I'm sure the migration people here know. And some people say there aren't even theories. But one of them in the 80s was that the sustainable livelihood approach, which presumably you've all got tattooed on the back of your eyelids, was the people with the most capitals, most assets, were the ones who they sent away. Of course, kind of like you're proof of that as well, aren't you? You're mainly young, mainly able-bodied, visibly, as far as I can see, and you're highly educated. You have all of the assets for why maybe your families have invested in you to come and study here. And it's the same process that was suggested about why they are predominantly men that go away. There are a lot of exceptions to this, where the Philippines, for instance, who invested in nurses. And if you go to a lot of hospitals in London, for instance, you'll see Filipino nurses, female nurses, women nurses, I mean. And there's if you start to look into detail, there's some really confusing cases where why one village would send migrants and another one wouldn't, to do with how migration from the sending locations is viewed. And I had a PhD student who looked in Mexico, and I think it was in Veracruz, but I can't remember off the top of my head. And she had two villages, and she was an ethnographer. And one village, they were really into migrating to the States, and the next one they weren't. And she came to the conclusion that it was because one of the men had migrated from the village that didn't tend to have migrants, and he had disappeared. He'd used it to start a new life. So that discourse was about whether migration was a good thing. I think the thing that might be interesting is asking you. You get an idea of the issues here. What's the solutions?
Yeah, that was a question I also wanted to ask. So yeah, the floor is open to you and also to Elhadji and Naira. Good to see you back, Naira.
Sorry, I'm back. I just I thought I had enough battery and I don't have my charger, so I'm back with my phone. I don't know if I finished answer the question, but again, I wanna appreciate the comment that was made. And yeah, sorry for the interruption.
No problem. We can keep going here. Yeah.
Hi everyone, and thank you for sharing your story. I guess my point was like related to yours as well, because I was wondering, as you mentioned, Elhadji, you want to go back at one point. So my question is, as you mentioned all these like intersected issues in your country and in your local experience, how do you see the future? And what are your hopes?
And I will translate. Okay. ¿Lo escuchaste, Elhadji?
Yo no. Es que el futuro, si queremos cambiar algo o queremos conseguir algo, tenemos que saber primero que no va a ser fácil. Y de saber no va a ser fácil y no está en tu país y está otro país, va a ser todavía más difícil. Y solo lo que podemos hacer es creer que es que no ha sido fácil. Yo creo que desde que empezó Portugal en Senegal, que sé que era 1776 hasta 2025, nunca ha sido fácil para los africanos ni para ningún país que está en África.
If we want to change something, it won't be easy. If you are in another country, it's even harder. It has never been easy. Portugal, for instance, has been there since 1766. I got it right.
Entonces, a partir de allí que empezó el tema de los esclavos, cómo vivían nuestros padres, nuestros madres de esos momentos, que fue, son varios siglos y todavía pensamos que has cambiado cosas para que podamos conseguir nuestro futuro hoy en día y no. O sea, lo han modernizado de no decir esclavo a decir inmigrante. Entonces, de inmigrar vamos a estar en otra fase de tema si lo podemos quitar, si no, es que no podemos cambiarlo, porque hay más cosas que están detrás y nunca lo dicen, o no llegan de punto a decirlo, o como si da miedo en decirlo, ¿sabes?
So from there, slavery started, our parents, etc. We still think that that things have changed, but no, they have just been modernized. We are just in a new stage, in a new phase, and we can change it. Yeah, and we can change it.
Porque si estamos hablando, por ejemplo, del tema de inmigración, cómo pueden conseguir su futuro, porque en realidad antes decían los esclavos tenían que trabajar y ahora no es que estamos diciendo los esclavos, estamos diciendo los inmigrantes. Entonces lo que dan los inmigrantes, por ejemplo, en Europa, no es para tener un futuro mejor, porque no te están dando nada que tú dices, a partir de este momento yo voy a tener un futuro mejor. Solo lo que te están dando es lo que tienen todo el mundo y como algo más modernizado para no decir esclavo, para decir inmigrante y para decir ya está legal, te dan una tarjeta que ponen permisión de trabajar, no te están poniendo feliz vida ni ya has logrado nada ni nada, te dicen aquí tienes que trabajar, si no trabajan te lo quitan. Y nosotros ahora tenemos que poner que nuestro futuro para conseguirlo, tenemos que trabajar.
Because if we're talking about migration, how do we change the future? Before, slaves had to work. Now, we call them, or we say, migrants. What we work for now is not for the best. They're not giving you a better future, really. It's just something modernized with a card saying work permit. So they tell you that you have to work here, and if you don't work, they will take it from you.
Entonces, de tener todo eso y ya estamos aquí y tenemos nuestro hermano allí y pensando que nosotros podemos conseguir algo que va a ser mejor de ella y ellos, su mente y su futuro ya no va a estar en África. Su futuro solo piensan que para conseguir un cambio de África, un cambio de Senegal o cualquier país de África, piensan que lo podemos conseguir aquí. Y aquí no hay nada más que modernizar las cosas, pero siguen igual. Entonces, eso nos fastidia más allá para conseguir un futuro, porque en todos lados, por ejemplo, desde que tenemos los portugueses, después los portugueses, los alemanes, después los alemanes, los españoles, los ingleses, los americanos, después de los americanos vinieron los franceses, hasta hoy en día es casi el mismo concepto, pero más modernizado. Entonces, con eso va a ser muy difícil. En todos lados tenemos los franceses, todo lo que tenemos África, en Senegal, los países que los franceses tienen colonizado, a lo mejor 80% son para ellos, nosotros que tenemos 20%. Entonces, no va a ser muy fácil porque quiero que nosotros vamos de retraso 50 años, por ejemplo. A lo mejor ponen una ropa aquí, lo trajiste de allá y dicen, mi abuela usaba esa ropa. Entonces vamos muy de retraso y Europa sigue tirando en África y sigue dando paso adelante.
So from here, having just our siblings there in Senegal, in Africa, knowing that we can do something here, they will think that we can change Africa from here, from Canary Islands, Spain. But here it's just modernized, or slavery is just modernized. And that's a challenge. First the Portuguese, then French, Spanish, British, Americans, then French again. So today it's just the same concept of modernized. Everywhere we're French. As colonizers, colonized countries, they just received 20%, and the French took the other 80% for the profit. So in 50 years from now, people will still use the same clothes. People will say, hey, grandpa, this is your shirt, because they are putting barriers to develop, to their own development. Gracias. Thank you.
No.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Gracias.
There are
Hello, congratulations this moment. It's very important. This topic is very complex for us, everybody. My name is Yara. I'm here at IDS in visitor Valor research fellow. And my question is about the context migration of geopolitics. I have 2 or 3 questions. In the global geopolitical scope, what is your analysis of old and new form of migration? New form of migration. What are the main challenges in the global migration framework? And everyone, what can we learn from these experiences? Thanks, congratulations.
Okay, so how can we change or learn from these experiences, the geopolitical scope, and the global change framework on migration? Do you get the question?
I do. I think it's a good question. I suppose in one thing you might have learned from being at Sussex is that the answer always sounds like it depends. And it depends on the context. There's no simple answers in a way of these issues. I'm not gonna problematize them. I think, as I say, the global frameworks have some framing in them that I find a bit tricky. And that's kind of othering the problem. So if we go back to quite a bit of the things that our people online have said about why people move. One of the solutions that came from a Bangladesh audience that I was with was because people, when you said to them, ask them, why did you move? And you know they've come from a place where it's had riverbank erosion. They say, no, I'm going there because I want a job, right? Now, I know there are political aspects to the labour markets, but what their solution was, you give people the education. So you don't actually even talk about migration. You're just saying, if I give you an education, then you can, when you do have to migrate for whatever the reasons or are displaced, you'll get a better job. You'll have more rights because you do, as someone, even though it's not perfect, but it's the criminalization was an interesting point because there are lots of narratives. And one of my colleagues, she looked in Brighton at unaccompanied minors, not minors digging minors, children. And that narrative, if you didn't have an education, you didn't have a chance to get another job, then you were much more liable to getting involved in the drug trade, the Albanians, this was. So I think so when you look at those global frameworks, my problem with them is they're trying to address migration, not sort of like the surrounding parts of migration, which is essentially development. And I mean, development's a horrible term as well, but you know, they are much more about the larger context about why people move, and not sort of just choosing migration as good or bad, or it depends. Just saying, well, actually, maybe it's more wider than that. And I don't see that those global frameworks do that, because they're about regular and controlled, and there's another word, I think, security, migration. And you've heard from the Senegal example, you know, this is a classic political economy question. So yeah, I think it's a really good question, and it kind of like feedbacks to some of you are obviously going to be in that world, and it's really easy to get focused. I find myself doing it anyway. Get focused on one area, and really that maybe the solution is just to the right or to the left of that. I mean, no, I don't mean politically. I mean just
yeah, it gets really complex. Personally, like not knowing much about the literature or migration or anything, I just like by living there, the more you dig into the topic and the root, the more you realize that it's a completely chaos when you try to understand all the factors that come into play, the social, political, the political economy, then the environmental as well.
And they're basically outsourcing
to
the peripheral regions. I mean, you called Canary Islands in French, it means peripheral.
Ultra periférico, outermost.
And they do the same with Libya, of having sort of, it's a guard, isn't it? Saying you can come in, you can't. It's what do you do about that when, you know, you must realise that, okay, even if you've stepped outside of Brighton, the bubble that is Brighton, there is xenophobia everywhere.
Indeed, and we're just running out of time, unfortunately. We can have more discussions in a moment, but thank you very much for everyone that came, especially, you know, during summer. I think it's very hard to see people around here, especially to the speakers, to Naida, Elhadji, to Dom, thank you so much, to people that were behind the documentary that we cannot see today, and to the ideas, and especially to Laila, because if it wasn't for her, I don't think that we would have able to host this event. So thank you very much.